Hello and welcome back to this video lecture for chapters 4 and 5 out of your book. We're going to start this second part with step 4 for guidelines for the interviewer. And so one thing you want to do is if you're going to interview several people, try and designate a leader for each group. And what this will do, it'll make sure that they help you to run the interviews smoothly. And also, they might be able to get some additional information from those other group members outside of the interview process. And that person would then report back to you with any additional information you might need. And it should be obvious, but you want to prepare your questions before your interview. And so that will help you give focus and direction to the interview and provide some continuity for the participants. On those questions that you use, you want to have them open-ended so the user can add additional information as needed or as it comes to their mind. So you don't want to ask a bunch of questions that are yes, no type questions. You would ask questions like, well, what information do you need? What outputs do you need here? Do you need to collect this type of information? Would not be a good example of an open-ended question. So instead of saying specifically what you need to collect, you'd say, what type of information do you need? In step 6, you want to make sure that you take very good notes. If you're not good at taking notes, or if you're conducting the interviews yourself, maybe assign somebody else to take those notes and then transcribe them and give them to you later. You could also record your meetings if you don't want to take those notes. Hopefully, just watching this video lecture, you are taking notes. If you're not taking notes and you're not watching this lecture, which means you didn't hear this, you're probably not going to do well on the final exam, because this is where your questions are coming from and where I can determine whether you've participated in learning something about database design. When you're speaking to someone and doing the interview, make sure that you're giving them equal and undivided attention. If you're not, it's going to seem like their responses don't matter and they're going to just freeze up on you or hold back, and you're not going to get as good a quality information out of them that you might somebody else that you're paying attention to. You don't want the interview to take forever, and so you got to make sure that you're moving along at a good speed, but not too fast and not too slow. And so this allows, if you're setting your personal limits, this allows time for you to ask all the questions that you'll need in a specific amount of time. So you may want to allocate maybe 30, 45 minutes to ask questions. As we get into people's shorter attention span, maybe you only want to interview for 15 or 20 minutes and then have multiple interviews after you come back with, say, a prototype of whatever information that you've been gathering. So this last step here is always maintain control of your interview. It's probably the most important guideline for every interview that you are going to conduct. And so if things go off topic, make sure you're ready to bring it back on topic. So you may need to redirect the discussion when needed. The next thing we want to talk about is the mission statement. And so the mission statement is going to guide you in your decision making about your database design. And so as you can see here, it declares the specific purpose of the database in general terms, that you define it at the beginning of this entire process, and then it will help guide you in what you're trying to produce. And so this is also, if you know exactly what you're designing this database for, then it's going to help you not get sidetracked with additional features that weren't in the original design. So again, this is reasons why database projects go over budget and over time, is because they didn't really define what the exact need of this database is at the beginning, and use that as a way of defining, okay, should I go off in this other direction or not? And so if you're doing consulting, it's fine to let the customer go off in other directions if they're willing to pay for it and they're willing to extend the time. And typically they're not. They just want you to cram all this other features into the design, and then you look bad because you didn't deliver on time or on budget. So make sure you define your mission statement early on. And so a well-defined mission statement is going to be succinct and to the point. You're going to have your specific purpose of your database, and it's not going to be sprinkled throughout with specific phrases or sentences that talk about specific tasks. So just to summarize that, you would have something like the following. So free of phrases or sentences that explicitly decide specific tasks. You wouldn't have that in your mission statement. So hopefully you're reading in your book in chapter 5, we look at Mike's databases. And so here's an example of a mission statement. Is to maintain the data we need to support our retail sales, so everything that goes along with that, and our customer service operations, so everything that customers might need. And so as you can see, it follows along, it's succinct and to the point. Specific purpose of the database is clear, and it doesn't say exactly what the tasks are going to be. So this could be a good template for any database design mission statement. So when you're creating this mission statement, how do you know what that purpose is going to be? That's where the interviews come in. So you're going to interview the owner or manager of the organization. You're going to learn about the organization and determine what that purpose of that database is. And to me, it's always been defining what the output should be and who's going to use that output. If I know the output, then I can determine what information or data I'm going to need in order to produce that output. As you're conducting those interviews, you want to make sure that the person is giving you as much information about the organization as they can, even if it's not pertinent to the database. So the idea is that you understand the organization and the processes that are going on so you can build those into the database if needed. So after you have the mission statement, you may want to you probably should run this by the actual users and management to make sure that everybody's in agreement on what the purpose of the database is. After you've written the mission statement, then you want to think about your mission objectives. And mission objectives are statements that represent the general tasks that your database is going to produce. So each mission objective represents a single task. And so then once you have that, then that acts like a little checklist of things that you can mark off as you write or produce that for your output in your database. So some things you're going to look for in your well-written mission objectives is it's going to be a declarative sentence that clearly defines the task. You don't want to have too much detail in there, and it's going to provide the what you're doing, not how you're actually going to do it. So it's similar to your logical design, but it's not going to be your physical design of how you're actually going to implement that logical design. So again, you're going to get this information from the interviews. And so your interviews should give you an overall idea of those general tasks that the database is going to do. As you're doing those interviews and you're thinking about, okay, here are things that they're saying are going to be some of the things that are part of the mission objectives, make sure they're talking about how everything is going to be used in the organization. So that's where I've got this written here, where it discusses many facets of their work in the organization as they possibly can, because it may be that this database can help them with other tasks that are related to what you're originally designing this for, and they may not even know it. And so it may be able to produce even more reports, and then they won't have to go back and make changes later on. Lastly here, look at this last sentence. When you're defining those mission objectives, hopefully they can be explicitly defined, but they may also be implicitly defined. And so as you develop more and more databases, you learn to read between the lines and make assumptions about things from the interview. And so you need to really pay attention and listen to what your customers, the end users here, are asking for and wanting, and how they will use this database. So this database use becomes a process in the business of what they're doing. And so this ends this video lecture over chapters 4 and 5.